Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of So Basically Let's Talk. I am your host, John Lasko. I am so happy that you have decided to join me again today. If you would like to learn more about the podcast, learn more about So Basically Let's Talk, as well as myself, head on over to our website, sobasicallyletstalk.com. That's sobasicallyletstalk.com. You can also visit the So Basically Let's Talk channel on YouTube. I would sincerely appreciate it if you would like the videos and subscribe to the channel. Again, the channel on YouTube is called So Basically Let's Talk. A big thank you to those who have already liked the channel and subscribed to the channel, and those who are going to subscribe to the channel. A big thank you from me. I do sincerely appreciate that. You can also follow us on our social media pages, and you can do that on Facebook, facebook.com/So Basically Let's Talk. And you can also follow So Basically Let's Talk on X as well. Do you have a story idea or maybe an interesting topic or subject that you would like me to discuss here on So Basically Let's Talk? Email me and let me know. That email address, so basically let's talk at gmail.com. That's so basically let's talk at gmail.com. All right, without further ado, on today's episode, Greg Brannon has spent the last 15 years as AAA's Director of Automotive Engineering Research. He joins me now to talk more about how temperatures affect both the efficiency and maintenance of both hybrid as well as all electric vehicles. Greg, thanks so much for joining us on So Basically Let's Talk by taking time out of your busy schedule to talk about the research that AAA has done when it comes to both hybrids and all electric vehicles.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. I look forward to the discussion today.
So basically, Greg, with gas prices still putting a dent in Americans' wallets, some are now taking a second, third, fourth, fifth, however many times look at hybrids and even all electric vehicles. However, recent research by AAA discovered these vehicles have their issues as well. What did you find out in your research?
We've taken a look at electric vehicle range and the temperature and the impact of temperature on that range in the past, and we found some pretty interesting things. And what we wanted to do was augment that today with information around hybrid vehicles because there is a renewed interest in that technology. And as you said, the fuel prices really driving a lot of people to look at these alternative powertrains. And so we looked at the impact of both cold temperatures and hot temperatures on the efficiency of those powertrains, and we've really found some interesting things.
Wow. So, okay, let's go ahead and, Greg, focus on hybrid vehicles first. So, were there any particular makes and models that you tested? And what was specifically involved in those tests in regards to temperature? And I know that this is a loaded question. I know that there are a lot of questions in this one particular question in regards to hybrid vehicles. But did one hybrid actually fare over another?
Well, I'll tell you to start off, AAA and the way that we conduct our research, we really don't get into comparing vehicle to vehicle. Our focus is on the overall technology, and so what we try to do is select vehicles that are mass market, very popular with consumers, and representative of what you might find, the average consumer buying and driving every day. And so we chose three hybrids and three battery electric vehicles, and then compared the average performance of those. There's some variability among those, of course, there always is. Manufacturers choose different strategies, but we sort of look at the performance in aggregate. In this case, we looked on the hybrid side. We had a CRV, a Honda CRV, a Toyota Prius, and a Hyundai Tucson hybrid as well. So that was our selection of vehicles, and we really then will look at the performance sort of in aggregate.
Got it. And so what kind of battery of tests did you perform on these three vehicles?
So whenever we do testing that is related to either the fuel economy, emissions, or for in the case of hybrids and electrics or battery electrics in particular, range, we use a chassis dynamometer, and what this is a device, a room with a very complex, expensive piece of equipment in it. And if you can imagine strapping your car down to a treadmill, um, and that treadmill controlling, all of the variables, including the temperature in the room, as well as the exact drive that you go on
Mhm.
for the test. And so that's how we conduct it. You may see other places that actually put them on the road and drive them, but the challenge with doing any of that, it's not very defensible because you're pulling too many levers at once, right? You've got too many variables, and so we like to control all the variables we can, to make the test as repeatable and accurate as possible. And that is the same way that, for example, the EPA certifies the range or the fuel economy or emissions for a vehicle. So we have a laboratory that is set up in that same manner.
Now, I probably already know the answer to this question, but Greg, you may surprise me with the answer. So I would venture to say more so. I mean, with the hybrid vehicles, with the two SUVs that you tested versus the Toyota Prius, that the SUVs were probably more of the gas guzzler, or at least not only the gas guzzler, but also did require more electricity than probably the Toyota Prius did, or did they kind of all fare the same, or am I totally and completely different to where the SUVs actually outperformed the smaller type of vehicles?
Well, again, I'm not going to get into the details of one over the other because I really want the audience to not saying, come away from this thinking, oh, well, this is the particular vehicle that I should get, right? Well,
Okay.
we'll focus on the performance of them in aggregate. And I'll say that whenever you do this type of testing, it's actually quite interesting, at least from an engineering or car geek perspective. The dyno or the dynamometer, right, that we use takes a lot of variables into account, and what it has to do is to simulate the load that would be on the vehicle if it were on the road, right? And that load would come from a few different things. It comes from the weight or the inertia of the vehicle. It
Mhm.
comes from the aerodynamic drag of that vehicle, and it comes from the mechanical drag of the vehicle. So in the case of an EV, or the bearings and things in the motors that are, and the friction of the tires on the rollers and all of that. And so it's really pretty interesting because um, the dyno can simulate all of those things. And I think one of the easiest ways to sort of picture this mentally for someone is that we could have the exact same engine, let's say a piston driven internal combustion engine, a V8 engine,
Mhm.
in a box truck, like a delivery truck
Mhm.
that is shaped like a box, that we have in a Corvette, or a
Mhm.
sports car, right? And you could put the exact same tune and exact same exhaust system and everything on those two vehicles, and they're going to perform exceedingly different in the real world, right?
Mhm.
One is lighter, one has much bigger tires, the box truck is shaped like a billboard that you're trying to push down the road and all of that, and right, and the dyno takes all of those things into account and then puts the proper load on the vehicle, so then we can test the vehicles in a fair and equitable way. And the automakers give us a lot of data about what those specific loads are, and we've tested some of them ourselves. It's quite complex and challenging to do, but it can be done. And yeah, and so if you've ever wondered, how automakers come up with fuel economy or range numbers, this is how they do it. And it's challenging. But to kind of go back to your point, will a Prius perform better than a CRV? Well, it depends because they will all be outfitted differently. They all have different drag that is on them, and they have different battery and propulsion systems. And so it's not fair to say one's more efficient right off the bat than the other.
So let's go into this temperature contrast when it comes to hybrids and all electric vehicles. So, as far as the temperature is concerned, as far as the issues are concerned with hybrid and electric vehicles, is it more so while it's being driven? So not only is it the air temperature as well as the temperature of the engine, or are you seeing these issues happening with it just being the climate wise? So if it is 90 plus degrees all the time and the car is sitting outside or sitting in a hot parking lot, are these issues happening by that specific instance as far as just the temperature is concerned, or are these issues happening by it not only being a combination of the temperature but also in terms of how the vehicle is being driven?
It's really a combination of things, but the temperature. So the temperature impacts both while the vehicle is resting and it being prepared to be driven, as well as while it's being driven, but not in the way that you might think. So whether we're talking about hybrids or pure battery electrics, the truth is that the battery packs in these vehicles are pretty much comfortable in the same conditions that you and I are comfortable. About 75 degrees is where they're happy, and anything that is much above that, they have to be cooled, and if it's much below that, they have to be warmed. And so if you think of them, just like a human, where we've got a little window in which, I can sit in my shirt sleeves and be comfortable, and I don't need a jacket, or I don't need the heat on, or
Or you're not sweating in a suit like I am here in the So Basically Let's Talk studios. Yes.
you got it. And so all of those things kind of come into play. And so what has to happen is that energy has to be expended to keep that battery pack happy. And so, in the case of a battery electric vehicle, the only place to get that energy from is from the battery pack. So, to cool it, it takes energy to run a air conditioning type system. It's often like liquid cooling that's happening in that vehicle, and it's like a heat pump that will both work in the cool and the hot. And so they use that to condition the battery and keep that battery happy. The same can be true with the hybrid, but it's important to remember that the hybrid battery is much smaller
Mhm.
than the electric vehicle battery. It could be as much as 10 times smaller. It's extremely uh, downsized, and so the
Wow.
impacts um, are much different. And so while it's resting, I've had the experience. We do some testing in the desert. This is necessary for some of the type of work that we do, and I've found that my EV had 20% less range whenever we test it overnight and come out in the morning, and you might find your EV has, without it plugged in, has 20% less range than it did whenever you went to bed.
Wow.
And so that's part
That's
of it.
significant.
It is. This was extreme condition, but yes. Um, and so then the other piece of it, and the much more important piece of it, from a percentage standpoint, is the use of cabin cooling or heating, or what we call HVAC, right? For keeping the heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, right, to keep the cabin that 75 degree, or in our case 72-degree temperature, um, all the time.
Mhm.
And so uh, that it takes much more energy than it actually does just on the battery front. Our testing back a number of years ago proved that the impact of the HVAC was absolutely the largest driver of the reduction in efficiency. And so it's really keeping these fleshy bits that are in the car
Mhm.
comfortable, that absorb most of the energy that we're talking about, and the reductions that we see.
Wow. Wow. I mean, it's significant as you look all the way around, and with the 75-degree temperature where that happy medium is with the battery. I mean, it's few and far between here in the United States. I mean, you either have one extreme or you have another extreme here in the United States. So I mean, there's really not that happy medium here in this country, or really in any country. I would presume. I think I would be really accurate in terms of saying that, to where you can get to that 70, 75 degree temperature, all the time, or at
Right.
least when it counts, in order to be able to get that efficiency, or to be able to get to that point to where you can have that battery running smoothly, or at least without issue.
Right. I always think of it. And I live in Florida, and so we suffer from a very long, wet, hot summer here, and so I always think of those days, like these glory days between summer and our winter, that they're like fleeting. So those nights when you can sit out there and it's 70 degrees out and you just really enjoy that, and then on the other end when it's warming up, it's the same fleeting days. It's when our friends to the north are out gallivanting in their shirt sleeves and it's 40 because they're so ready for it to happen, right? So yeah, it you're right. We do not live or work or operate in a environment that is 75 degrees. I think San Diego, California might be pretty close, but outside of coastal California, there's very few places where you can count on temperatures that are that moderate all year.
So, what advice would you give to Americans who are looking at hybrid vehicles, who are looking at all electric vehicles? And I guess I have to put an asterisk next to all electric vehicles, just for the simple fact is that a lot of manufacturers, I mean, GM, Ford, the American auto manufacturers are really not cranking out all electric vehicles as they probably did just a year or two ago, just because Americans aren't. I don't think, I don't know. I could be wrong, Greg, but I don't think Americans, and I can speak for myself in that majority, if there is a majority, on my opinion, that I don't think Americans are ready for all electric vehicles. What do you think is the factor behind Americans getting very squeamish, or not really taking all electric vehicles that seriously right now, and are not ready to trade in their all electric, or they're all, excuse me, not they're all electric, but they're all gas powered vehicles for an all electric vehicle?
Well, I would kind of counterpoint that a bit. We have been tracking American driver interest in going electric for, gosh, almost 10 years now. And over time, we have seen that interest ebb and flow, but it has never exceeded 25% of Americans that are interested in going all electric. And it's tended to hover around 20%. And that's where we're still at today. A couple years back, it was higher. But I think that's a pretty significant amount of Americans that are interested in going for this technology. And then, I think we're still seeing sales today of approximately 10% of new vehicles that are electric, and that is pretty significant. But it will take some time, and I think that sort of the more experience that I have, the older I get, whenever I see these new things coming, I think my skeptical side says, yeah, that's pretty interesting, but it's going to take a minute because it's simple math. We have over 280 million cars on the road in the United States, right?
Mhm.
And since COVID, we have not replaced more than 15 million of those a year. And so if you figure, we'll just call that, round numbers. We'll say, you've got it will take us, if you 282, so we'll just call that 300 million, and we're going to sell 15 million every year. It'll take you 10 years if every new car was sold to get to that was battery electric to get to half of the cars on the road. So if we're selling only 10% of the new cars, it's going to take decades for us to have a a largely EV fleet. The same goes true with any technology. It will take decades for it to come to fruition. With that said, I think there's been some massive um, growth in the electric vehicle segment. We see a proliferation of models and things available for consumers. But the actual purchase behavior still shows some reluctance from the Americans to to fully embrace um, EVs. And they consistently tell us that the reasons that they don't are
Mhm.
the price of the vehicle. They're more, and now we've recently lost the incentive that was in place for the tax rebate incentive there, so that does not help the situation much in terms of getting people to adopt it. So there's a cost difference to buy it. There's a lot of worries about whether or not the battery will have to be replaced in their ownership time, and we also have continued fears around range anxiety and the idea that I might run out of charge while I'm
Yeah.
driving my EV, and I don't know where I'll charge that. And so those are some of the barriers that are holding people back. But with that said, I feel like we are still making good continued progress on this, and the track that we're on right now is going to show us what the true consumer interest is, because there's no governmental push towards it that's really assisting at this point.
Greg, let's talk money right now. Now we you did go over the issues of hybrids and all electric vehicles in climate conditions. Was there like one particular issue that a hybrid had, and one particular issue that an all electric vehicle had, say in temperatures that were 90 degrees and above, and then also let's just say 32 degrees and below? And were these costly repairs? I mean, are these costly repairs and repairs that would take these vehicles out of commission for extended periods of time to have to be replaced?
Well, let me just walk through some of the numbers here with the audience. So what we looked at was really again around efficiency, and we had that baseline of 75 degrees. So when I'm talking about a change from that number, I'm talking about looking at the change from 75 degrees to a hot temperature of 95 degrees, or a cold temperature down to 20 degrees Fahrenheit. And so at 95 degrees, we saw that hybrids had about a 12% decrease in fuel efficiency, and EVs showed a 10.4% reduction in efficiency at that high temperature. Again,
Mhm.
largely driven by the use of air conditioning in that scenario. At cold temperatures, we see a little bit bigger gap. We see hybrids at 20 degrees lost about 22, 23% of their fuel economy,
Huh.
and EVs lost 35.6% of their range. And so, really well over a third of the range, or 39% of the range, and 35% in MPGE, which is fuel efficiency. Um, so, so figure 40% of your range uh, lost at 20 degrees. That's significant. And that comes down to the issue that we were talking about before. That is keeping the cabin cool, and the cost to keep that cabin cool. So there's a real cost in terms of and warm, sorry, in the cold temperatures, and there's a real cost to that in both the efficiency, the range, as well as dollars and cents. Um, the less efficient something is, the more energy it takes, the more it costs to drive. And that EVs are not immune from that. Neither are hybrids. So in cold temperatures, you can expect hybrids over 1,000 miles to cost you about $28 more to drive that at 20
Wow.
degrees than it did at 75. EVs, depending on where you charge it at home, that same 1,000 miles might cost you $32 more to drive. Um, but this is the one that I think will surprise a lot of people. The public charging is quite expensive, and whenever you combo that with the decrease in range, you're going to see, about $77 in extra expense to drive that 1,000 miles in your EV.
Whew.
And so it's not free.
That's a lot of money. And also too, I what I've noticed is when I would get off at rest areas or service plazas, especially if I would be traveling along the turnpike, that it does take a lot of time in order to be able to charge all electric vehicles. So this isn't a quick process.
No, it's not. But there's some ways that people are combating that. And it's kind of interesting, particularly if you use the software that's embedded in the vehicles to help you through a road trip. They sort of help manage that by reducing the amount of energy that they suggest you intake at any given point. And so imagine a road trip in your gasoline vehicle that sort of gets you to your destination with sort of a minimum amount of fuel in the tank, right? And
Mhm.
what that might require is that you stop and you put 3 gallons in at this station, and then you drive another hour and a half and you put, you know, 6 gallons in at this station, and then you get to your destination and you need to fill the tank completely back up. That's sort of how the software and the systems, the mapping systems are designed on electric vehicles to minimize that charge time. As the other pretty interesting aspect of it is that electric vehicles and any lithium battery really does not like to charge when it's hot, and whenever they discharge, they generate heat. So you cannot cram as much energy back into it whenever that battery has just been discharged, like when you've been on a road trip using it at steady state. So that's something to keep in mind, and that's why I think a lot of these algorithms have it such that you're just putting the minimum amount of energy, spending the minimum amount of time and money to get to a destination where you can charge it overnight.
So, if I'm hearing you correctly, Greg, when it comes to family road trips, vacations, anything that would cause them to travel maybe from coast to coast or from one end of the United States to the other, probably more so any type of significant travel, an all electric vehicle really isn't worth it, correct? I mean, it would probably your better efficiency would come from a hybrid.
It's I wouldn't say it's not worth it, and there's many EV owners that are very happy to make to take the time and do the planning that's necessary for it to work. And if you do that, it can be an efficient way to do it. But no, it's going to take you more time than it does in a hybrid vehicle. There's just no doubt about it. Um, it can offer a time for families to get out and go to the bathroom and grab a snack or what have you, but you are going to spend more time on the road than you do with a hybrid. There's no question.
Well, Greg, let me just tell you something. I am learning a lot about hybrid and all electric vehicles from you that I never even knew about. So you can tell, and our viewers here on So Basically Let's Talk can tell that number one, I drive an all gas vehicle. Number one, and number two, I really not have taken that even that first look at a hybrid or even for that matter an all electric vehicle. Um, I guess what really also caught my attention too was a survey that AAA conducted in terms of the likelihood that Americans were likely to buy a hybrid vehicle. And
Hmm.
I think it kind of took me aback a little bit, just for the simple fact is that I mean it's combination gas and electric at the same time, to where you're not all the time relying on an actual battery. So in 2024, when the survey was first conducted, that 31% of Americans were likely or very likely to buy a hybrid vehicle, and then that only went up by 4% in 2026. Why is that?
Well, I think it gets back to the issue that I pointed out earlier. We've been doing this for a very long time, and we see that the percentage of Americans that are interested in going electric, be that hybrid or or battery electric, has remained, fairly steady. And I think some of that has to do with um, with some of the concerns that people have about the technology, whether it be more expensive, whether it be unknown about the repair and maintenance costs of it. Um, and I think that another thing that is important for your listeners to consider, and I'll just throw the piece of advice out there, is that I think if we were to do this survey again, the survey was fielded in March of this year. If we were to do the survey again in April or May, when the gas prices were much higher, I think we would see that number be a bit higher, because people tend to react to that number that they see on the pump or on the sign as we drive by. Our fuel price experts say, there's not many other products out there that the grocery store, for example, does not have to display the price of milk on a big sign out front of the grocery store. And so it's interesting in that way, because consumers react to it because it's in our face all day, every day. But one of the things that people will do, and I try to caution against this, is make vehicle purchases based on short-term gas prices, right?
Yeah.
And it is a very poor financial decision to be swinging the type of vehicle that you make or that you drive and own and operate based upon the current gas prices, because they tend to fluctuate.
Yeah.
And owning a car is a very expensive thing, and it's generally the second most expensive purchase that any American household makes. And fuel prices, surprisingly, are not the biggest piece of ownership of that vehicle, right?
Yeah.
The hidden cost is depreciation, and depreciation is a massive part of owning a vehicle. And so that's where hybrids and EVs and the equation gets a little bit interesting when it comes to the depreciation. So happy to talk about that further if there's
Yeah, let's
interest.
go ahead and talk about the depreciation aspect of it, because I would assume that when a vehicle is a hybrid or even all electric, that the depreciation value would be minimal versus a all gas powered vehicle.
It's actually the opposite. So a battery electric vehicle tends to have a extremely high depreciation.
Really?
And it is, and that means the value that you bought it for versus the value that you can sell it for after so many years. We've done a tracking study since 1950, and we use a 5-year time horizon for that. And the value between those two things is significant for a battery electric vehicle, and that is because of the fear of having to replace that battery pack
Hmm.
while you own that vehicle. And so the person that's buying that used is, in some people's mind, taking a gamble whether or not they will have a brick that they have to then spend 5, 10, 15, $20,000 to replace this battery pack in the vehicle. That being said, there's many examples of EVs going hundreds of thousands of miles, um, with some degradation, but not needing a complete replacement. So it's kind of an interesting thing, and I think it's a little bit of fear of new technologies, but balanced with the fact that you know it's still a bit of an unknown for people. And that goes with both hybrid and EVs. So hybrids suffer from some of the same, but not nearly as much.
Wow. I am very surprised about that. That just of the significant depreciation value of all electric vehicles. Is the same true for hybrids as well?
It's not as significant for hybrids. And some of that has to do with some of the brands that are most prolific in the hybrid space. You can't talk about hybrids without mentioning Toyota. They, almost every vehicle that they have now is either only hybrid or offers some hybrid variant. And Toyotas historically have very good uh, levels of depreciation, very minimal levels of depreciation compared to other brands, because of the perceived longevity of that product. And so that has something to do with the hybrid space in general, but no, they don't suffer nearly as bad as the battery electrics.
Now, talking about hybrid efficiency, can drivers choose when they want to use the battery versus when they want to use the gasoline in their tank? Or do they not have that control?
Now, generally, you don't have that control with a hybrid. There may be some adjustments that you can make in terms of the way you drive that may extend the amount that is done on electric. But generally, the transition between electric and the gasoline engine is done by the vehicle, and not a lot of choice or variability. Some hybrid owners report that they can get significantly better or significantly worse economy depending on the way you drive.
So does that more depend on the miles per hour? So does that depend on, going 25 miles per hour versus 65 or 70 miles an hour on the freeway?
Yep, the types of places you drive, the sustained, higher speeds, the how fast you accelerate, all of those things play into it, and into how efficient the vehicle can be.
Now, also in the survey, the primary reasons for interest in hybrids instead of fully electric vehicles, of which none of this surprises me, but I'm going to see if it may surprise you, or maybe if something wasn't part of that particular list. Of course, the 76% at the very top was more suitable for long distance travel. I can absolutely understand that, as we talked about here on
Mhm.
the program. Wouldn't be as concerned about running out of charge while driving. 73% said that. I can very much sympathize with that. That we also talked about as well. Wouldn't be as dependent on finding public places to charge. Now, that was 66%. Now, I noticed that there are a lot of service plazas now and even some regular gas stations that do offer charging stations. Do you feel that the amount of charging stations that are available have gotten better, or do you feel that we still have a long way to go as far as being able to make those charging stations available, but then also too even affordable as well?
Yeah, it's a really big challenge for battery electric. It's gotten tremendously better. Tesla has made a massive investment that has sort of boosted that forward for the whole industry. And but in addition, the other public charging networks, they do suffer. They suffer from lack of funding. They suffer from uptime, and they suffer from availability, and all of those things make it a sort of a challenge for consumers to to find reliable public charging consistently. We've experienced this ourselves in our own testing, and I think it's still a problem today. Fundamentally, what's behind that is that the charging networks have to become profitable in order to sustain themselves, just like the gasoline industry has over time. And so far, it's proven very challenging for those charging networks to become profitable in a way that allow them to maintain the investment.
Now, also too, I didn't even think about this as well, but you know what? These people are right. No need to install a charging station where I live. 52% said that. I mean, electric bills are already expensive, Greg, and I can't imagine how much on top of just what people would be paying for turning on the lights or running the refrigerator and other appliances that need electricity, how much would be tagged onto that to have a charging station.
It's not as much as you're paying for gasoline at whenever you charge at home, but I will say it is highly dependent on your market. Some, we use an average kilowatt a price per kilowatt hour or something, or 15 or 17 cents per kilowatt hour. I have to look, but some markets might be double that. And so it really matters where you live, and it often matters when you charge. But in general, if we look at the average, um, the consumers, if you look at the average versus what an average price of fuel is, maybe not the price we're paying right now, but the average price is your cost for the energy will be a third or 25% what it is for electric. That being said, it's not free. when it's home. And I think when when you're charging at home, and I think some new EV owners are a bit surprised at at how much it does add to their electric bill, while others, depending on how they drive, may not even notice it. Compared to the what they're paying for fuel. Um, but with that said, if you have to augment or use exclusively public charging for your electric vehicle, you are almost certain to pay prices that are commiserate with whatever the fuel price is, or the equivalent fuel price today. And so, any benefit that you get from reduced cost from fueling, if you have lost those because you are paying for public charging, you're not going to get the financial benefit out of driving an EV that you thought you might.
No, absolutely. And, I was just going over the numbers here that there were 55,000 charging stations in 2022, and that has increased to 80,000 today. So, I mean, like you said, they're making progress, but there's still, a lot of things that need to be done. But I mean, I can understand people's hesitations, including mine, as far as, okay, there may be charging stations that are, available in certain areas, but at the same time, how do I know that? I mean, is the all battery electric vehicle going to tell me that, hey, there's a charging station coming up, or do I have to cross my fingers and hope that, that there's actually a charging station that's going to be at this service plaza or at this exit that's coming up here? So I understand people's hesitation when it comes to all electric vehicles.
Yeah, and the vehicles will tell you that a charging station is ahead.
Oh, really?
They will, but what most of them don't do is tell you whether or not that charging station is either occupied or whether the charging station is operational. We have found time and time again, and the data supports this, that there is a vast percentage of the independent charging stations that are not operational at any given time.
Wow.
And that is, goes back to the viability of those networks. And we just have to make sure that the investment is done there to ensure that they are available and working. I'm sure we've all driven into a gas station and the pump was, had some tape on it saying don't use this one, but
Yes.
rarely do you find the entire gas station like that, and
One
rarely
of
would
my
you.
pet peeves, Greg, one of my pet
Yeah.
peeves.
Yeah. So we can't say it doesn't exist in the internal combustion world as well. It does, but at a much lower frequency. And generally, then we would just drive down the block to the next station. It's a little bit more challenging with the
Well, and
EV.
I mean, I think that's all tied into efficiency as well when it comes to these vehicles, because I mean, if like you said, if okay, the car is going to tell you that there's a charging station at the next exit or at the next service plaza, but like you said, if they're all occupied or if they're not working for one reason or another, that defeats the purpose. And especially if you're running on fumes, meaning a low charge, there's really no way in order to determine, unless the car is going to tell you, in terms of how much battery life that you have left, that you're going to actually be able to make it to that next service station, however long that is.
Yeah, and it is dependent on the automaker. Some are getting that sophisticated, and others simply are not. And it's the reliance on these third party networks that is really challenging for them. So, yeah, there's more work to be done for sure.
Now, on these survey results, and of course, I'm just going here. 36% say that it's cheaper to maintain than electric vehicles, and we're talking about hybrid vehicles. And 2% have other opinions as to why they don't want to purchase an all electric vehicle. But are you surprised that something didn't make this list, or that they weren't in a different order?
No, not really. I think that's sort of what we would expect based on our past research in this space. Uh, the we did see that the item that was cheaper to maintain than electric vehicles was down from the last time that we surveyed that. So there could be there could be some learnings that people are having from the market and the maintenance and repair of electric vehicles as well as hybrids that is driving some of that. But no, that all makes sense, and I think if you unwrap it from the lens of the consumer, that all kind of makes sense. All right.
Greg, I know that we're running out of time, and I really do appreciate you taking the time in order to talk about the efficiency and the issues that are caused as far as temperatures are concerned when it comes to both hybrids and all electric vehicles. Let me ask you this, Greg. If you could offer any piece of advice to Americans, what would you say to somebody who lives in the Southwest or who lives in the South or who lives in the Great Lakes or who lives up north? Is there a particular vehicle that people should be looking at? Because I mean, the United States runs the gamut on temperatures, and it doesn't matter whether it's winter, spring, summer, or fall. We experience every single type of temperature imaginable. Yeah, maybe, not 32 degrees and below right now, but is there a particular vehicle, a hybrid vehicle or all electric vehicle that performs better in certain parts of the country?
Well, to answer your question, I would go back to my advice whenever I'm approached about what type of vehicle to buy, and that is the same advice I would give anyone, and that is really to understand how you use your vehicle. And that is the most important question to answer. I think a lot of times, and I am extremely guilty of this, you can ask my family and friends, I make emotional purchases related to vehicles, right?
You and me
And
both.
yep, and it is not one that is defended by data. um, AAA has, as I mentioned, we've been doing a cost study on the cost to own and operate vehicles since 1950. We call it AAA's Your Driving Cost, and you can find this on the web. If you Google AAA Your Driving Cost, it'll bring you to a really neat calculator that shows you what it costs to own and operate a vehicle in your state.
Mhm.
And so if you're considering going to a hybrid or electric vehicle, I think almost in any state and in any circumstance, there's cases where those can make sense.
Yeah.
And that is often a two-car family, a two vehicle home where one vehicle can be reserved for extreme conditions and road trips, and another vehicle can be reserved for short trips and your average commute to work. I think one thing that we often buy vehicles for is like I call it the 1%, right? So how many Americans
It
are
looks
driving?
good. I look good in it.
Yeah, and how many Americans are driving pickup trucks, and whenever asked, "Oh, what do you do with your pickup truck?" It's, "Oh, I might get some mulch one day to put around the house," right? Meanwhile, your operating expense for that vehicle is over $1 a mile, right? Every day, all day, driving it to work. I'm guilty of this. Uh, and so the thing that people really need to consider is their actual use case for the vehicle, what you're using it for. And I think there are hybrid and EV options for almost anyone. You just need to be considerate about what your use case is, where you live, and what your average day looks like. And if you like to go camping a few times a year and you might have too much camp gear to put in that small sedan, then darn it, rent a car for that weekend, and I promise you, you are still going to be better off financially than you are from driving that big truck all the time. And the same goes with hybrids and EVs. So just do the math, use the tools out there. Your driving cost calculator is a great one for it, and yeah, make good choices. Don't be like me.
Well, we're both in the same boat, Greg. So,
Okay.
I normally what happens is I drive by a dealership and I just see a car that just screams me for whatever reason. And it's like, I gotta have it, regardless of how much it costs, regardless of the maintenance or the upkeep that it may cost me, no matter how much debt I may incur because of it. It's just kind of like it's this impulse buy where you automatically have buyer's remorse after it. But at the same time, it's like for me anyway, the buyer's remorse really doesn't affect me as much because all I do is just imagine me behind the wheel of it, and I'm just like, it's
bring
worth
bring
it.
brings you some joy. That's exactly right. And life is short, but again, I'll remind you that the vehicle purchase is one of the most expensive things we do. So resist that urge, give some consideration to how you actually use it, and you'll end up well ahead.
So, Greg, the moral to the story is not to be scared off by hybrid or all electric vehicles, number one, but to realize that issues as far as efficiency are concerned, as far as maintenance is concerned, as far as spending money on the upkeep is concerned, doesn't go away just because it says it's a hybrid or just because it says that it's all electric.
Yeah, that's right. And there's more to owning a car than the cost of fuel. And I think that that's an important thing for people to take away is that you need to understand that the operating expense of the car is largely driven by the depreciation, insurance, maintenance, all of these other costs outside of fuel that we often don't even think about. And so you need to make the right choice for you, and do your research, and you'll end up in a good spot.
Awesome. Greg, let me just tell you something. I learned more about hybrid and electric vehicles and the efficiency behind them more in this 45 to 50 minutes talking to you than I have had coming into this conversation. Greg, it was certainly a pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on to So Basically Let's Talk and giving us your expertise when it comes to hybrid and all electric vehicles as far as efficiency and what people need to look for when they are purchasing or looking to purchase or lease a hybrid or all electric vehicle, and the that it's not all peaches and cream when it comes to those types of vehicles, that there are issues that can come abound, but you just got to be smart and you got to do your homework and research when it comes to it.
That's right. Thanks for having me. I really enjoyed the discussion.
All right, Greg, thanks so much. Have a great day.
You too. Bye now.
Well, that was a great conversation. I learned a lot from Greg, and I hope you did so as well. If you would like to rewatch this or previous episodes of So Basically Let's Talk, head on over to our website, sobasicallyletstalk.com. You can also check out our YouTube channel. That channel is called So Basically Let's Talk. I would appreciate it if you would like those videos and subscribe to the channel, youtube.com, that channel, So Basically Let's Talk. You can also follow us on social media, facebook.com/So Basically Let's Talk. And we also do have an X platform, which is So Basically Let's Talk. And if you do have a story idea, or if you have an interesting topic or subject that you would like me to discuss here on So Basically Let's Talk, send me an email. That email address, so basically let's talk at gmail.com. So basically let's talk at gmail.com. Well, thanks so much for joining me. And I do appreciate all of your support. I appreciate your views. I appreciate all of your support that you give me on the website as well as on the YouTube channel. I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next one. I am your host, John Lasko. And until I see all of you again, stay safe and have a great day, everyone.